Hello, guys, and welcome back to Time Under Tension. It has been far too long, but we are really excited today to dive into the last branch of this series we've been doing on mind, body, spirit connection and how they're all interrelated, equally important, and have a unique role in this system. But first, let's talk about some life updates. We are getting certified, and I would love to hear more about what you're doing.
I was literally like, "What are you about to say right now?" Like, what life update are we sharing? Um, yes, I'm getting certified as what they call a breath master. Essentially, it's getting certified in breath work and coaching the breath. So, what was really cool about hopping back into this podcast after a couple weeks now was knowing that this session was on spirit. And one of the first things that we were taught is that the Sanskrit word for breath is spirit. And that to me hit home because I've believed since really the transformation I had coming back to God over COVID was that his spirit lives in me and it's because he breathed life into me. So his breath is my spirit and my spirit is my breath. So knowing when I wake up and I still have a breath, that means my spirit is still alive. And connecting those two things together, knowing how powerful of a tool the breath is to truly not only accessing different different aspects of your body, but also being able to tap into different parts of your mind. To me, it connects everything all back together to this central point.
So you said when I wake up and can and have my breath, I know my spirit is still alive. Do you think that the spirit can exist outside of the body?
That's a good question. I'm probably going to ask you the same thing. What I align with personally is that our mind is actually part of our energy field that all of us hold. And our energy field is connected. The source of our energy is our spirit inside. So, one of the things that I do on my calls with my breath coaching cohort is I identify by saying that I am energy. I don't identify with my human given name. I don't identify with being gay. I don't identify with anything else. It's I am energy. And that's how I identify because everything that I am is energy. And knowing that our spirit is outwardly projecting this energy field into the rest of the world, that helps me not only understand that, say, we're interacting with one another, our spirits are interacting because our energy fields are interacting with one another. Why your environment is so important because that energetic field that's outside of you is connected to your soul source, your spirit, which is connected to the source, which is God, which gives you all of this information that is expressed through the body and through the brain. Your mind is connected to that outer source of energy. And if you can understand that your mind is a part of this force field that's connected directly to the spirit, you can understand your power to change and transform energetically. That's going to transform the way that you think and the way that you feel. I'm not sure if that answered your question directly, but I think our spirit projects externally and can meet others in that way, in that realm, the unseen.
Mhm. So
What do you think?
the spirit is not held down or limited by the body.
Right. I think our spirit lives in our body, but projects energy externally. I think our bodies are vessels, they're the temple for our spirit. Would you agree? What would you say?
I do agree. Uh, I am a huge fan of Andrew Huberman and have watched so many of his podcasts. And one thing he says pretty often, if you've ever listened to him, is he'll say something about the spirit. And he's like, basically says, like, I don't believe in that because you can't point to that in the brain and tell me where it lives. And that's one way of looking at it. And coming from a science background, I can understand that point of view, but also coming from a nursing background, I have worked with a lot of patients who have had near death experiences or where they have flatlines and they can, when they're conscious again, if they're, blessed enough to be able to come back into this life in their body, a lot of them talk about being outside of their body and seeing their body. And that's very difficult to explain. And I think a lot of times it's easier to just kind of brush it off because it's not something we can fully comprehend. But personally, with my own experience in that realm and then my own spiritual beliefs, I do believe that we're separate and not separate in a disjointed way, but separate in that we are more than just the physical. We have this spirit that transcends the physical. And when I believe, like when our lives are over, we exist as our spirits and we surrender this body. So I definitely do think that. I'm curious about your thoughts around. So, for those of you who don't necessarily have like a Christian background, one of our beliefs is that when Jesus died and rose again 3 days later, before he left the world, he gave us the gift of the Holy Spirit. And he acts as the intermediary between us and God through communication of the Spirit. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the differentiation between the spirit that we identify as ourself and the Holy Spirit that's within us?
I think they're one and the same. I think we are gifted the Holy Spirit because of Christ, and that happens through breath. And for me, in my beliefs, when I understood that the Holy Spirit lives inside of me, it helped me so much more when I understood the concept of intra-connectedness, which is a new term that's kind of being coined here. Yes, Andrew Huberman makes a point. Where can you point to where the spirit lives in the brain? The point is, though, our brain and our body are gifts of expression. Our spirit is unseen. The Holy Spirit is unseen. Our mind is unseen. But our mind and our spirit express themselves through our brain and our bodies. So understanding that concept and the intra-connectedness of those two things, along with the intra-connectedness of all of us with the source, the universe, God, whatever you want to say. Obviously, we believe God. If you think about the sun is the source, and we are all just rays of that sun. So in my view, we are that light. We are God. We are just a ray of God, and we are connected to everyone else and everything else on a spiritual level because we're all coming from the same place, which is the source, which is God. So trying to separate the two things, to me, is the whole reason why Jesus died for us, was to remove that separation and to provide us not only a way to live in the spirit and walk in the spirit by a true reflection of a man living in that way, but also because he conquers death and he conquers the body and he conquers sin. And if we are going to believe that Jesus truly did die and resurrect, and that's the core, obviously, belief of Christianity, then when he says that I am who I am, that's the perfect explanation for us and who we are. I am who I am because he is who he is. And I am just a reflection of him that gets to walk around in this vessel of expression and this brain that gets to also then hold consciously and subconsciously thoughts, processes, passions, my imagination, all of that in there is crafted on purpose for me to walk in spirit to pursue the purpose that I hold here in the world. And I'm super curious your answer to this as well. So I'm throwing it right back at you. Would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's something that I deep down feel like I believe that our spirits are pure, and we see it most clearly represented in childhood. Just this wonder and flawlessness, not perfection, but just like this blamelessness of a child, that there's no like evil intent there until the flesh starts getting distorted and the world starts to influence and trauma starts to create breaks in identity. And to me, it's really hard to look at a child and say, original sin, like this child is sinful from the start. And I think that's where I have wrestled with this most. When I started going back to school, which I no longer am in school, but I started going back to school, thinking I wanted to pursue like my master's of divinity. And very early on, a lot of the things that we were assigned were about how we're sinful from the start. And, you know, basically we all we can do is hang on to grace because we come into this world broken and separated from God. And I have such mixed feelings about that view, and I don't think it's as simple as saying that that's right or wrong. I think it is right and wrong. Because I think that because the world is distorted and because our flesh is because I think our spirit is somewhat limited by our flesh. Like I think once our spirit is separate from our body, it will have more dominion in our lives and we can be more alive with God without this like block of flesh. I also believe that God made us in his image and we are intrinsically good. And I think we come into this world intrinsically good. And it is just because we are so easily misguided and because we fall prey to that hungry desire for power and knowledge that we start to reject the goodness, the truth of God for what the world is telling us is true. And it's just kind of the fate of us all as humans. And so to me, that gives me way more hope knowing God is still doing a work within me and there is this goodness that exists within me and his spirit is communicating directly to my soul in a way that will allow me to live in alignment with him as much as possible, as long as I continue to align myself with him and study his truth and create a relationship with him and deepen that over time and live in and out of love. So I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think it's a tough thing because most things I've been taught in church have been around original sin and that we are inherently sinful. And I think that our flesh is limited. And so if that is the sin, then yes. But I also think our spirits are pure. I really do.
Yeah, and I want to kind of add in a little bit of some science in there if you don't mind. Because I think what you said, I've been learning quite a bit about the years from birth to 7 and what that looks like from a brain development perspective. And you talked about it the other night after breath work. You entered theta through your breath. You were able to tap into that theta state, or theta brainwave, which is pure meditation. And you're in wonder and you're in awe. You're awake, but you're surrendered. And in that place, it's similar to a dreaming state, right? But when you're developing as a child, you're living in that state, and you see it in kids all the time. I mean, they're playing in the dirt, and really it's this entire, like, amazing arena of, like, all of these animals that are, or bugs or whatever that are having a family, and they have, kids or whatever. Like, they're just creating, like, all of these things. It's amazing. And we see that, and it's because they are living in that place because they don't have full development yet. That is why those years of a child's life are monumental, because that is where your subconscious mind is creating the patterns that you will live out of until you realize your patterns no longer serve you because of the trauma that you experienced in that place. And you have to work really hard to make them conscious enough to rewire them. So, my point in sharing all of that was, when you're young and you're entering into theta constantly, every single thing you're experiencing is forming you and formulating you. So, your spirit is so open in those years that as you begin to develop in your brain and you've established these subconscious patterns, now you're developing parts. And the parts of you are the ones that function out of the ego, which is that part that aligns with original sin in my mind. Because ego is selfish, and ego is about me and what I think that I need to feel worthy, when that's the sin. Thinking we're not worthy and need something outside of ourselves to be worthy, or to be loved, or to be heard and seen. And so the reason I brought all of that up was because we have access to that in the now, through our breath, and through the Holy Spirit, through connection to God, through connection, building relationship with Jesus, building relationship with ourself, learning ourself, being more conscious of our mindful patterns and the thoughts that are coming up, the beliefs that we are established in. What have we learned that isn't necessarily serving us anymore, on to the very core level of original sin? If you enter into this world and you think you're just broken, and you hold that as truth, you're going to consistently be finding evidence as to why you're broken. And you're not going to think that you can be whole. And that in itself is going to be the thing that keeps you stuck, which in itself then keeps you not worshiping God, which then is sin, right? Like, just being out of alignment. And I loved what you said about the body is almost this block. And the thing about it that really stuck out to me is, this block of a body is not the thing we're battling. And this was something that I had to learn. I'm not fighting my flesh. It's not me versus my body. It's understanding that because I have this block of a body, it is the thing it's our temple. It's encompassing our spirit, which means that it's providing our humanity, which is the thing that is rooted in the original sin. The aspect of original sin is our humanity. But if we understand that the flesh is not our physical flesh, but the needs or the desires of the ego, which are pushing us away from kindness, compassion, love, gentleness, worshiping God and surrendering to Him, thinking that we need knowledge to be more powerful, to feel whole, to, have this sense of fulfillment inside and hope. It's not like the physical flesh that we hold. The biggest thing for me that I've learned in my spiritual maturity is, the flesh is showing me my subconscious patterns that no longer serve me. And my flesh is showing me that I am not perfect. And my flesh is showing me how much I need God. So if your flesh can turn into opportunity to learn self, to see that you have the power to choose spirit in that moment, and also becomes this piece of connection to seek out a relationship with God who is transforming you because of all of the things that you went through. It's like, I know I'm kind of going on a little bit of a roundabout tangent here, but when I think about all the trauma that all of us have been through, I feel like that is 100% on purpose. 100%. Because when we get to a point where we understand that our spirit is a choice to live out of and that we have access to truth always, the trauma we've been through is now the perfect opportunity to unharness our inner power over the things that have kept us stuck or kept us, I really should say, kept us protected for so long, but also then become the avenue at which we impact the world. We begin to show compassion for everyone else who have been through something similar. The goal of trauma, in my mind, as a gift from God, if you can view it that way, is that we get to see our own power and we get to connect to Him and see how much love He has for us. And then we get to guide and lead and co-regulate and show compassion for other people who are going through something similar. We get to heal. We get to be our own healer, and we get to then go heal the world.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And I think, when I was thinking about this topic today, I think a lot of people, myself included in multiple seasons of my life, feel like, well, if I can get my body right, like if I can do the things I need to for my body, and I can get my mind right, I can go to therapy and I can meditate and I can journal, isn't that enough? And, I can only speak for myself, but I feel like to me, spirituality is the one way I feel like I can rewrite that story of trauma to mean something so much more than it could ever mean if I was just limited to mind and body. And the other day I was thinking about some family trauma, and normally I would get a little bit angry about it and feel like an injustice was done to me. And then I would feel bad that I felt that way because, other people have it worse. It's not that big of a deal. And like, my parents did the best they could, all this stuff, but I didn't. I just let myself feel it and I let it work through my body. So I was like letting my mind and my body just go. And I felt sad and I felt tears come up and I felt angry and then I felt just hurt and I felt like how I did as a child, like just helpless in the situation and frustrated and like no one could hear me and I like mourned for what my childhood self had to go through because it just hurt so badly. And I agreed that it was wrong and it was something that, in a perfect world, I wish would not have to happen to any child. But then as it processed through, I realized that that was the moment when my spirit had the voice and could come in and speak to those parts and say, but the reason that that happened was so that, and it was my purpose, and that to me, purpose is that thing that comes from spirit. And I just don't know that you can have purpose truly without it because spirit is, to me, is what's spirit communicates through truth. And I believe that Jesus is the way and the truth and life. And like you can't be in alignment with truth without him. And so when I am in alignment with what he has said and God's truth, that's when I feel like I can actually rise above the trauma in my mind and my body because my spirit is able to use truth to create a deeper meaning. And it was really cool to feel all of this happen because it very much felt like mind, body, and spirit working in succession, and spirit being the one that closed the loop of healing.
Super powerful. Do you feel like you can walk through your, can you go back and see that there took other learning opportunities or other experiences that happened in your life where you were getting closer and closer to getting to that place, that ability to do that? And let me ask it another way. I want everybody to understand that this wasn't something that you just reflected on one time and were able to get to a place where your spirit was able to say, it's okay to feel all of this. This is how you release this. And I'm going to show you the deeper purpose in this. Were there different opportunities? I'm calling them that, but different moments in your life where you weren't able to get there and you were able to maybe learn, okay, I can feel my emotions or my emotions are valid, or kind of say, tell everybody a little bit more about some of the other lessons you had to learn to be able to believe that spirit was the end closer, the one thing that was going to tie everything together.
Yeah. Part of my journey with my eating disorder was believing that if I could just purify my body enough, I would feel like I was enough finally. If I was just disciplined. So there was the mental aspect as well. I was just disciplined and rigid and held myself to a standard of excellence. And then there was this aspect of orthorexia, so needing foods to be very clean and not processed, and I would immediately feel like sick. I would make myself sick if I felt like I ate something like dirty or unclean. There was this pursuit in there of wanting to feel like purified by my actions with my body and by my mindset. And it was so empty. And the more I tried to find peace that way, the farther I felt away from any sense of peace and the more it took hold of me. And I feel like every time in my life I've tried to lean on my body or my mind solely or just the two together to achieve a state of peace and meaning and purpose and just calm, it doesn't work. I think that we can leverage them. I think they can all work together, but I think spirit to me is the one that I think they're three rings of a circle, but I kind of see the spirit above them or surrounding them both. And to me, I function personally way better when spirit encompasses mind and body, and they're both influenced by spirit as well as each other. But spirit has like a different level of wisdom, where my mind might tell me, for instance, you need to not eat whatever. You need to not eat carbs because carbs are going to make you fat. And I might even feel a sensation in my body because I'm always of, oh, when I eat a carb, I feel whatever, fat, or I feel like I'm holding water, which who knows, could be true a little bit, which is fine. But spirit is the thing that is like this quiet whisper of like, I don't know why, but I'm like really craving carbs right now. And then my mind and body try to come in and be like, oh no, you're not supposed to do that. Like, oh no, all these rules and things. But spirit's like that deeper wisdom that I can't quite like explain. But when I listen to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, my body needed that. Holy cow. Couldn't have explained it. And if I looked at what everyone says is right or wrong, I couldn't, I wouldn't have even gotten to this point. I just kind of had to like trust my gut. And it's that like deeper instinct that I feel like can guide my life so much more effectively. But it's difficult because it's hard to explain to other people. which I feel like we often feel like we need to do. Sometimes it's in conflict with what our mind is telling us. And sometimes it is asking for something different than might have been right in a different season of life. That can be challenging as well. But the more I go with it, the more at peace I feel in my life. And so I would say the more in alignment I am with my spirit and letting my spirit dictate my decisions more than just my mind or body, honestly, the happier I've been, the more joyful I've been, and the more at peace and the less anxiety I've had. And that to me is one of the biggest reasons I feel like it is the most important, like dictating factor of my life.
And we talk about how to find or know your spirit, because I think that was such a beautiful story that you shared. And one of the biggest parts of all of that was you've identified that your spirit functions out of peace and kindness and compassion and is 100% in alignment with God, which means that is truth. That is wisdom that you need, you in this moment, and good and bad need to leave the premises. Because what I love so much about you was your mind is going to be consumed with learned behaviors, learned information from the world. What the world has said is good and bad, or someone you maybe respect says good and bad from a sleep perspective, from a diet perspective. But your spirit, which is connected to eternal wisdom and God's wisdom, was letting you know what's good. That might have been different from what your mind says is good. And identifying the spirit and being able to tap into intuition, which I think we've talked about before, is kind of like your spirit's communication pathway. Having the capacity to actually reach a place to hear the spirit, I think, is a really big piece of all of this. Because it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, your mind was dictating all of your behavior,
Mhm.
not your spirit. But it was because you had such a deep belief of wanting to be pure, that disconnect, that living in the mind and not being able to connect to the body, cut you off from that source of true wisdom. So, can you talk a little bit about how you discovered your spirit, or maybe the difference in the voice that you hear, or anything that could help people who are watching be able to decipher between the mind and the spirit?
Definitely. I remember being really connected to my spirit as a kid. I was just very intuitive. And then a lot happened in my life where I decided to stop listening to it. And I think it happens to all of us. That's why I think children are so beautiful because they really are so connected to their spirit and they're not tainted by allowing their mind to drive all the time in their flesh. When I really felt like I reconnected with my spirit was when we first met. You encouraged me to meditate, and I was just really resistant to it. But I had to do it my own way. For me, I needed to just lay and let my mind go. I had tried so hard to like be still and empty my mind or listen to something guided. I found that my mind just kept getting in the way. So I would just have myself like lay on the floor in the closet for like 30 minutes. And I set a timer for 10 because I was like, there's no way I can use 30. But what I found is it took 30 minutes for my mind to just play out and dump all of the crap that was just circulating and spinning at the front. It's like I had to get out all my to-do lists and my worries and my anxieties and fears and, you know, all the things I'd watched and heard and listened to, all of that had to just kind of dump out of my brain. And then once all that cleared, there was an empty space. And in the empty space, I could hear how much my spirit was hurting. And I could feel and actually see specifically what things in my life were wrong, were just felt wrong. I was super dissatisfied with my relationship, and I felt really lonely, and I felt like I wasn't really being myself, and I felt like I couldn't use my voice, and I was still experiencing hurt from my family that I hadn't worked through. There were so many things that came up. And that was the first time I felt like I heard my spirit, and I was so sad. But I was also so at peace because I realized it was still there all along. And when I thought that I'd lost God and I would need to work really hard to win back his favor and to get in the Bible way more and listen to every sermon ever, while I was enjoying those things, I felt like I would need to do all of these things to win back his favor. And when I found my spirit again in that moment, it was like, oh my gosh, here he was all along, just gently telling me, what I needed to do. And I always knew because I could feel the sense of dissatisfaction within, but I would just try to think myself through it or say, oh, well, I just need to work more, or I just need to lose some weight, or I just need to, make more money. I thought those were the solutions for the sense of dissatisfaction. But when I actually slowed down and listened, it was very clear where I was out of alignment. And now I feel like I have to hold myself accountable to taking that time to be quiet, to be still and know. That's really what it means to me. To pray to God is to just be still and listen and hear him speak. Like within the recesses of your mind. I think it's there once you clear out all the clutter.
Amazing. For me, mine was the identity piece. Once I could step outside of my thoughts, I realized I wasn't them. And so there had to be something else that I was if I no longer was at the will of my thoughts. I It wasn't about identifying with something else, it was letting go of identifying, period, with the
Mm.
thoughts. And in my life, I just lived by the behaviors that sh were giving me validation and love. And a lot of that had to do with my body, and a lot of that had to do with sex. And those patterns, I lived in them out of fear, and fear was driving my life. When I had to slow down because the world slowed down, just like you're saying, I was able to take the time to hear my thoughts and take the time to feel my emotions. But I realized, like, I am hearing them and I am feeling them. So therefore, I am not them. And that left me open to, well, what am I then? Like, who am I? And I didn't have a very good relationship with God after my high school experience. So at first, I had to take it really slow. And I was like, I'm connected to the universe. I experience energies. I definitely feel people. I know there's something greater out there. I don't know what it is, but I feel connected to that because I know I am not my thoughts and I am not my feelings. So the like de identification with my mind helped me to realize that I was not my mind. And that's insert spirit. And I started identifying with my spirit. And I started saying that I am love. I am love. That's what I am. I'm encompassed with love. And that's all I want. It's all I seek. It's what I feel like I need. But it is all that I am. And once I was able to access that place, I was open. enough to receive. And when I learned to receive, that's when I actually connected to my body enough to tap into the spirit. Because I think our spirit lives in our bodies. I think it's in it can be, different places. Our heart is obviously something that resonates with a lot of people. But if you're disconnected from your body and you're not allowing your body to communicate with you at all, you're not able at all to access any of the truth and wisdom that are coming from your spirit. And you're not able to access who you truly are. For me, and I'm saying this like I'm literally, as I'm talking, like looking at myself back then and like trying to coach myself, like trying to tell myself these things because I lived like this. I lived up here. I lived up here. I disrespected my body. My eating disorders were definitely a little bit different, but it was me against my body. It was me at war with my body because my body's the thing that's keeping me from love, is how I felt. So you're trying to purify yourself. I'm feeling like this thing is blocking me from God's love. So I'm just going to hurt it. I don't care about it. You know, I'm going to beat it down when I have a binge because it's all my body's fault. Like, you know, and having breath work, tapping into the actual spirit to understand that that was like the deepest level of a belief that I needed to uproot to access my spirit, to know that my body was this sacred vessel that's sending me everything that I need to know in any moment, as long as I'm willing to get still enough to quiet my mind enough to know that it's okay what I'm feeling, it's okay what I'm thinking, but it's not what I need to identify with. And I know once I allow all of those things to make their way and just see them for what they are and love the parts of me that think those things, then I can hear my spirit just like you and be able to take action from that place in a peaceful way. Your spirit is peace. Your spirit is kind. Your spirit is loving. Your spirit is faithful. Your spirit has the self-control that we all desire. But if we identify so strongly, when I identified so strongly with my thoughts that I wasn't enough, or I'd never be loved if this, if I never be loved if that, I wouldn't belong if this. Now all of a sudden, I'm creating that inner conflict and that separation from my own spirit, which is love for self. I know that was kind of a roundabout answer again, but I just think our spirit is something that we always will have access to if we're willing to identify with the spirit and willing to let go of identifying with our mind and identifying with our body.
Definitely. I think that's super powerful. And I think that's kind of a lot to take in, you know, but no, in general, I mean, it's a very dense topic, especially in comparison to what we've talked about with the body and the mind. And I feel like we could go so far with it, and everyone is going to have a little bit different relationship and maybe even a different way to connect with their spirit. But I think it's cool to hear our journeys because they are very different, but there is still this stepping outside of the body, stepping outside of the mind, but not disregarding them. I think recognizing like our parts are embedded in our body, but our spirit can rise above it, but our parts still need a voice, and that will come through our body and that will come through our mind. But then realizing that we at our core, our essence, can be like this gentle parent to those parts, and really experience God's love, like show ourselves the love of God because the love of God is within us. And that's super powerful. And I think from that comes enough healing to move forward in life and find purpose out of pain and make your mess your message and all of those things we talk about that just sound good but really are things that we all want, but also to have a deeper connection with other people because we're able to move past our trauma and from identifying with it and realize that we are something that's so much more than that. And we've already been forgiven for everything in our lives that has separated us from God. And now it's our choice to identify as the spirit that lives outside of those things and has already been healed of the pain.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave everybody with a couple of breathwork exercises to do because when you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, you're tapping into your intuition. That's your intuition breath rhythm, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And when you're in that place of focused breath work, you're able to tap into the place of true connectedness. So try this on your own. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. In for a count of 4 and out through a count of 8 for a count of 8. And do that for about 5 minutes and just see how you feel after. When you're in that place, also allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling. Allow your thoughts to just come as they are. Just continue to refocus on the breath when they surface. Do that, and you'll not only calm yourself down, but you'll regulate yourself out enough to truly connect to the spirit. If you're feeling like you need something a little bit different, I want you to think about blowing up a balloon from your hips all the way up into your chest. Nice, really slow and controlled in breath through the nose, and then nice, really slow and controlled breath out through the mouth. If you want to keep them balanced from a tempo perspective, that's cool. But if counting is too much, you don't need to count. You just need to focus on nice, deep breathing, blowing up that balloon from the hips all the way up into your chest, and then exhaling nice and slow. Just try that. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Have some fun getting curious about what comes up in those experiences for you.
All right. Well, I think this pretty much wrapped up our series on mind, body, spirit. And it's honestly probably a theme we'll come back to because I think it really is embedded in everything. But if you guys haven't, be sure to listen back to the other episodes to kind of wrap up that trio and review that and think about how now that you have more of a grasp on the spirit, how that relates to the previous topics that we've talked about. Try out some breathing work this week and maybe just try a little bit of quiet time each day, connecting with your breath or just allowing your mind to run until you can find that empty space and really start to reconnect with what your spirit sounds like for you and what it feels like when your spirit is nudging you throughout your day.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment below if you have any questions, and we will catch you next time on Time Under Tension.